Madam Speaker, there is an all undeniable truth in leadership. Power does not change a man, power reveals him. But if power reveals character, Madam Speaker, crisis exposes it beyond all shadow of a doubt. When the heat of crisis hits, the mask falls off, the polished speeches end, the manufactured media personas evaporate, and you are left with the unvarnished reality of who a person truly is. And what has this recent crisis revealed to the people of Jamaica? It has revealed that when confronted with institutional sabotage, toxic plots, and active betrayal within his own ranks, the leader of the opposition did not stand tall. He wilted. He folded. He retreated into the shadows for 6 agonizing days, paralyzed, silent, and entirely incapable of leading. A leader who wilts, hides, and cowers in the heat of crisis has no business seeking to lead a political party, and he certainly has no business asking to lead this sovereign nation. But make no mistake, Madam Speaker, his paralysis was not an accident. His silence was not a mere tactical error. Mark Golding acted precisely as his political lineage dictated, because he is a true unadulterated product of the People's National Party. The toxic DNA of that organization is present, active, and surging through his political veins. The truth is officially out, Madam Speaker. When forced to choose between basic national patriotism and the survival of his party, he chose the party. The People's National Party remains aggressively pro-PNP and completely anti-Jamaican. If anyone in this country still believes that those leaked National Executive Committee voice notes were just an isolated locker room slip of the tongue, I urge them to examine that very DNA. This is not a sudden lapse in judgment, Madam Speaker. This is their generational operating system. It is built on the infamous Speaker's Guild doctrine, which arrogantly declared to the Jamaican people that it is always best for the PNP to be in power. Not best for Jamaica, not best for the poor, but best for the party. It is built on the Omar Davies run with it legacy, where they willingly blew through fiscal targets, wrecked the economy, and burdened generations with debt just to buy an election. When they were in power, their doctrine was run with it. Now that they are in opposition, their doctrine is sabotage it. The playbook never changed, only the tactics. Madam Speaker, look at the cold-blooded evidence happening right now on the ground in Westmoreland. Minister Desmond McKenzie's revelations have exposed the smoking gun. Central government allocated $70 million specifically to build houses for unimpoverished, vulnerable citizens. But instead of laying bricks, PNP local representatives deployed deliberate, calculated delay tactics to freeze those funds. Look at the cruelty of their blueprint. They purposefully withheld payments from contracted builders, starving contractors out until construction ground to a halt. They actively weaponize poverty. And what makes this an act of absolute political treachery is that Westmoreland has been a staunch PNP fortress for over 60 years. These are not political rivals they are hurting. They are actively starving their own loyal generational supporters of basic shelter just to prevent a national success story. They are quite literally ruling over ruins in their own backyard. This is the living proof of those leaked tapes. The voice notes reveal a grand conspiracy to use parish councils as political roadblocks. And Westmoreland is in Westmoreland, that conspiracy is put into practice. It is the exact same reason why they fought tooth and nail to drag the National Reconstruction and Resilient Authority legislation into a joint select committee. They didn't want to improve the bill, Madam Speaker. They wanted a legislative graveyard to bury the hopes of disaster victims waiting for structural help. And how did the leader of opposition respond to this crisis? With a masterclass in weak, paralyzed, and inept leadership. This explosive scandal broke, yet it took Mark Golding 6 whole days to emerge from hiding. A statesman worth his salt would have read the Riot Act. He would have driven the fear of God into his party, standing tall to declare that treasonous anti-national sabotage has no place in public life, and certainly not in the People's National Party that he leads. But instead of moral authority, we witness absolute cowardice. He hid behind a pathetic technical cop-out, dismissing a recorded plot as a private WhatsApp group. Let the record reflect his complete tone-deaf silence on 4 non-negotiable pillars of accountability. There was zero apology issued to the citizens whose housing recovery his team actively conspired to disrupt. There was zero denunciation of the vile manufactured smear campaigns plotted against impartial public officers. There was zero disassociation or expulsion of the high-ranking plotters operating right under his nose. And there was zero apology offered to Major General Anthony Anderson for a planned malicious attack on his unblemished reputation. Madam Speaker, his cowardice was so absolute that he literally ran from the press corps. He blocked the media from asking a single follow-up question because he knew his crumpled credibility could not withstand 30 seconds of objective cross-examination. He hid behind a one-way scripted statement because he lacked the spine to answer for 6 days of hiding and active housing sabotage. So I ask this honorable House, and I ask the people of Jamaica, on what grounds do we ever believe another word that comes from the People's National Party? On what grounds do we take a single policy alternative, budget critique, or accusation they launch seriously? If a leader cannot bring himself to speak for Jamaica after 6 days of hiding, why should the Jamaican people ever give him the keys to Jamaica House? If they are willing to starve their own 60-year supporters of housing just to score a cheap political point, what path of destruction would they unleash on the rest of this nation? They have completely disqualified themselves from the conversation of governance, Madam Speaker. They are ideologically overweight on their own deception, drowning in their own political cynicism, and running a desperate soap opera while the country demands maturity. The mask has slipped. The receipts are stamped, and history will judge them for putting party before country every single time. With that, Madam Speaker, I thank you. And I thank you all for liking, sharing, and engaging my videos, as well as following me. Speaker, I rise today not to engage in the standard back and forth of partisan politics, but to sound an urgent, somber alarm about the very survival of Jamaican democracy. We are standing at a terrifying crossroads in our national history. When the citizens of this country can no longer trust the official constitutional mandated opposition to act with basic patriotism, the foundational pillars of our stable Westminster system begin to warp, rot, and collapse from within. The office of the leader of opposition is not a playground for cynical games, Madam Speaker. It is a vital taxpayer funded constitutional guardrail. It exists to protect the citizen from the executive overreach, to provide objective, honest critique, and to serve as a responsible government in waiting. But today, a dark, suffocating cloud hangs over this honorable house. The recent leaked voice notes from the inner sanctuary of the People's National Party's National Executive Committee have exposed a sinister reality that goes far beyond a temporary news cycle. It has exposed a generational institutional disease embedded deep within their political DNA. A doctrine that commands them to place the raw acquisition of power above the lives, safety, and vital survival of the Jamaican people. Madam Speaker, when you look at this leak, you realize it is not an isolated mistake. It is the logical culmination of an unbroken timeline of contempt for our democracy. Look at an instance where a former cabinet member and longtime party chairman of the People's National Party, Robert Pickersgill, the chairman for life, openly confess their true gospel to the public. He stated that it is always better for the PNP to be in power, and therefore, any means necessary to achieve that end is completely justified. No morality, no national pride, no patriotism, just a naked lust for office where the end always justifies the corrupt means. We saw that exact doctrine put into devastating financial action in another instance. Former PNP Finance Minister Dr. Omar Davis stood before his party and proudly boasted about engineering the infamous run with it doctrine, unleashing a wave of wild, reckless spending to artificially buy the 2002 general election. He callously admitted that they knew the economy would face absolute ruin, but claimed he had to do it because it was better for the PNP to win and deal with the fallout than to sit in opposition and watch Edward Siaga doing it. They intentionally broke the back of Jamaica's financial system, leaving everyday taxpayers to suffer the catastrophic fallout of FinSac just to keep their seats in high office. This is the definition of political pimp, treating the nation's survival as a personal bank account. And now, Madam Speaker, we arrive at an instance. The current leak voice notes. The technology has changed, but the corrupt DNA remains exactly the same. We caught them on tape, red-handed, actively plotting to launch manufactured smear campaigns against clean public servants and weaponized local authorities to freeze critical national development projects. Just imagine that. An arm of the government of the country, the local government, is being weaponized to stop the very projects from central government that are designed to improve the lives of people who have been affected by the hurricane. Just think about that. That's treasonous. That's bad mind. That's dirty mind. It's bad. In other words, they decided to strangle Jamaica while she is still reeling from the abuse of Hurricane Melissa. Madam Speaker, this is why they tried so hard to drag the NARA legislation into a joint select committee. It was all a scheme. You see them in Parliament pretending as if they are speaking for the people. Bludgeoning the government, accusing them of wanting to have corruption, accusing them of this, accusing them of that. They didn't want to improve the bill. They were grandstanding. They were playing to an audience. They knew exactly what they were doing. That committee was designed to be the legislative graveyard for NARA. The cold burial spot for the hopes of thousands of vulnerable Jamaicans desperately waiting for hurricane relief and structural help. They are simply not patriotic enough to let Jamaica win for once, even as Jamaica fight for her life. They are fiercely determined to burn down the entire house of Jamaica just so they can rule over the ashes. Imagine. This is where the true peril to our democracy lies, Madam Speaker. And this is where I want to focus. When an opposition turns a vital democratic tool like a giant select committee into a partisan hit job, they murder objective debate. When they plot behind closed doors to turn municipal corporations into political trenches to freeze national relief, they completely subvert the democratic will of the local voters. Local government is supposed to be the closest layer of service delivery to the everyday citizen. Trucking water, fixing community roads, cleaning drains. Turning those institutions into weapon silos means they are no longer working for the community. They are working to sabotage the state. The fallout of this cynicism is catastrophic, Madam Speaker. It breeds a toxic, deep-seated public disillusion and voter apathy. When the everyday Jamaican voter looks at the official opposition and concludes that they are actively plotting to delay hurricane relief and manufacture lies for partisan gain, the voter stops believing in the entire democratic system. They don't just lose faith in a political party, Madam Speaker. They lose faith in governance itself. In their mind, they are saying that's what politicians do. That's what politics determines. And that's fundamentally a lie. Politics can deliver and politics has delivered. Every day we go about our lives. We are involving ourselves in politics. Politics is about how society organizes itself to deliver services and products. So we are doing things to cause people to lose confidence and belief in governance itself. They tune out, they drop out, and they buy into the dangerous narrative that voting is useless. And then we complain about voter turnout. This is a major reason why voter turnout is so low, not just in Jamaica, in other places in the world as well. This is how democracies die, Madam Speaker. They rot from the inside out because an irresponsible opposition decides to treat the solemn duty of governance as a trashy online soap opera. By plotting to sabotage national relief and paralyze our institutions, they brought the ghetto to Garden House. They handed us the bad breed to do bad deeds. You know, just a short while ago, we used to say the PMP is in a race to the bottom. But now, they are the bottom. Not at the bottom, they are the bottom. Nothing gets lower than this. When a group of people can sit down to sabotage their own communities, to sabotage their own country, to sabotage the very people who give them power, it's not just scandalous. It's not just treasonous. It is immoral. But while they have become the bottom, the government that has been elected 3 consecutive times by the people keeps moving Jamaica to the top where she belongs. At least, if we have any doubt, we know that the government is on the side of the people. With that, I thank you, Madam Speaker. And I thank you all for liking, sharing, and engaging my videos, as well as following me to Garden House.